Hello and welcome to this edition of TZM Global Radio. I'm your host for today, James Phillips from TZM Education and the UK chapter of the Zeitgeist Movement. The opening to today's show was a song called This Is Why Christmas Is Bullshit by So Out There. I actually edited it slightly because there's a couple of bits where you just have some text rolling in the video, and obviously that doesn't really work for radio. I think it personifies where our values at Christmas truly are at. And I wanted to open with that today because today is the launch of the project The First Christmas, which I'll go through explaining in a minute. But the other reason for opening with this particular song is because this is the song that started the whole idea for the First Christmas project in the first place. Last year, basically, I put out this video with a comment to my friends and family saying that this year, please spend what you would have spent on me at Christmas on a charity of your choice or one of mine instead. I don't need anything. I'm rich enough. At which point a few of my non-ZG friends came on there to call me Scrooge and Bar Humbug, which is fascinating, isn't it? The cognitive dissonance that can be shown with that is quite astounding. Because if I were the Scrooge character at the beginning, then why would I be wanting you to give other people stuff rather than me? And if I'm the guy at the end, then, well, you're just pointing out the bleeding obvious. And you're not. It's meant to be a derogatory term of Bar Humbug Scrooge when you're being stingy. Well, I'm not being stingy. I'm saying give it to charity. You're being stingy because you're saying that you want it all for yourself. So if anyone's a Scrooge around here, it's you. It's not a problem. It's just rather funny that the attack they're throwing out there to use is to defend themselves against their own cognitive dissonance, because essentially they want to ask people for whatever they want for Christmas and don't want to think about those less fortunate than themselves, which kind of goes against the whole premise of what Christmas should be about, really. And anyway, this got me thinking, and that's where the origin of the idea for the First Christmas came from. So for those who don't know what the First Christmas is all about, I'll read out the statement that I've put on the Facebook page for this project. And it starts off with a little poem. So Christmas time is here again, a time of laughter and cheer, a time for spending precious moments with those that are near and dear, a time for family to come together, round the table to sit, and give to those less fortunate than you. Except, that's bullshit. The true meaning of Christmas today is that of materialism and consumption. It's become a way to validate and measure your social standing amongst your family and friends by how many gifts you get and how much they cost. That is how we gauge our most important relationships to our nearest and dearest today. Of course, we all know this is not what Christmas should be about, but we feel obligated via the pressure of tradition and marketing to spend huge amounts of money on endless reams of crap to show how much we care. For example, the UK spent $16.7 billion on Christmas gifts in 2010, a staggering amount that would feed all of the billion people starving to death on this planet for almost an entire year. Put simply, it is time to wake up and smell what we shovel in. So, what is the First Christmas all about? Have you ever tried to express the true meaning of Christmas? I have, and I must say it was the best damn Christmas I ever had. Last year, instead of buying me presents at Christmas, I asked my family and friends to please either give the money they would have spent on me to a charity of their choice, or give me a voucher to pass on to one of mine. So needless to say, there were some very happy disabled children having music therapy last Christmas and slightly less crap at the landfill site. We humans are not all that bad, you know. We've just been conned into thinking that collecting endless possessions and measuring ourselves by how much we own compared to others will somehow magically make us happy and better people. Well, no, it won't, I'm afraid. It makes you good consumers. Like that's all you came to this planet to do. Consume it. The truth is that we love giving to each other, and for no other reason than the joy it brings to our fellow human beings. There is nothing more pleasurable in life than to help and give to others, especially those less fortunate than yourself. So what are you waiting for? Join the First Christmas project today, and let's make this Christmas one to remember. So, how do you get involved? The First Christmas is easy to get involved with and costs nothing. Simply click on the following link. You can find that link on the Facebook page, The First Christmas, of course. And follow the instructions to add the First Christmas logo badge to your Facebook profile picture, indicating to your friends and family that this year you would rather they give what they would have spent on you to someone more in need than yourself. From there, feel free to include a personal message explaining why you are doing it, and you're there. Here is a link to a site that deals with charitable gift vouchers if you wish to use it, and that site is www.charityvouchers.org. The more people who share the logo and this page, the more others will pluck up the courage to come forward, so please feel free to spread the word far and wide. I know it's tough to go against the grain, but no one ever made things better for humanity by putting up with the way things are. They got up off their arse, bucked the trend, and changed things for the better. So if you know in your heart that it's the right thing to do and value your integrity, then what is stopping you? Go for it. You are what you do, not what you say. Thank you for your support. Oh, and one more thing. Merry Christmas. And that concludes the statement from the Facebook page, The First Christmas. I don't think I really need to hammer this home too hard with this particular audience I'm talking to. Be the light of change you wish to see in the world isn't some fancy little statement by which you sit by and you plaster on your wall and think you're doing great stuff. It means what it says, means go out and actually be that change. Well, considering we're talking about a unified system based on efficiency, collaboration, and sustainable human values, very much relating to our use of resources, then celebrating a festival based on consumption doesn't seem to work too well with what it is we advocate. So, with this being said, it would be really great if you could just take 5 minutes of your time to go to Facebook, type in The First Christmas, go to the page, like the page, click on the link, click on the next link which says add to your Facebook profile, add a little message, and you're done. That's all you've got to do. It's really not that taxing, really not that troublesome. And remember, it will only work if we get a vast volume of people actually engaging in this and actually doing it. Because then if people start to see these logos pop up in several different places, that starts to get them thinking, starts to get them asking questions. What are these little golden C's with Christmas hats on them anyway? That's the First Christmas. Oh, right, okay. And by that buzz that's created, who knows where it could lead. Remember that there's scientific studies out there that show that if 10% of a population want to roll passionately with an idea, the rest will follow. This was exemplified by Rage Against the Machine reaching Christmas #1. That was literally a viral campaign against the X Factor over here. And so it just shows that these things are possible, but we do need a critical mass to come together to do something like this. Essentially, we're always asking for what projects we can do on the ground to make a difference now. Well, this is one you can do. Let's face it, Christmas is a gargantuan consumption festival. It's hideously wasteful and grossly against the values that we talk about pertaining to sustainable social practice. I'm not advocating charity as a course long-term to solve the problems that we face on this planet, but it's what we have available to us now. It's what we have in front of us now. It's about changing the cultural zeitgeist, if you will. Well, our current cultural zeitgeist is that we should all go out and buy as much crap as possible for each other in this insane annual waste festival we like to call Christmas. Somehow it's supposed to show each other how much we care. Put simply, it's one of the values in our culture that simply has to change. So, if we are the Zeitgeist Movement and we wish to change the current cultural zeitgeist to one where we are considering ourselves to be one human family, looking after each other and our planet's resources, then this seems to be a pretty good way to start to do that. The difference between the First Christmas and a lot of other organisations that ask for charitable donations at Christmas is that this is contingent upon you as an individual deciding that you do not want to partake in this madness. The most important thing is that it is a visual thing you can display on social networking sites, in particular Facebook. Because if you can get a wide enough spread of people doing this, then it will spread further. So we have to start somewhere, guys. Why not start here? Why not start with the biggest consumption festival of the year? The biggest materialism junkie festival that goes on this planet. Why not start there? Especially seeing as it is not actually even supposed to explicitly be about that, and claims through movies and other forms of media that Christmas should be about something entirely different. So you've got an absolute value hijack open and ready to go if you can coordinate it in the right way. In other words, reach a critical mass of people who say Christmas is bullshit. Well, let's do this properly for a change. It just seems to make sense to me. So I really, really hope you guys feel the same, and I really, really hope that you support this. And I'll see you out there on Facebook, because I certainly will be supporting it, and I'll probably be pinging you with endless messages about it. So I'm not going to leave you alone, basically. I'm going to terrorize you both night and day until you help me. So there you go. One more thing to mention with regards to the first Christmas is the fact that it is not going to be labelled with the Zeitgeist Movement. It doesn't have a Zeitgeist Movement label on it, because then it leaves it open to a larger audience of people who might not necessarily agree with us, who may not even know about us, but agree that Christmas has turned into something that it should never have been in the first place. And so that's the beauty of this project. It's something that everybody can identify with, and regardless of what background they're coming from, or what their political views are, or lack of political views, or whatever it might be, this is something that's pretty universal and that people can identify with and be involved with no attachment to any other organisation. It just so happens that it suits the value shift that we want as a movement, and we have the opportunity through things like this radio show and various other communication methods to mobilise quite a large group of people here who could make that initial splash quite a big one and really get something like this off the ground in a very big way. So I hope that's all made my point quite clear, and I really thank you for all of your help on this project, guys. Cheers. In other movement-related news, Peter Joseph's second episode of Culture in Decline is now out. This particular episode is called Economics 101. Very well worth a watch if you haven't seen that already. And he has announced the title of his new film series, Into Reflections, which closes off the Zeitgeist film series at a trilogy, which really makes a lot of sense, I feel, after moving forward was such a detailed and lengthy exploration of the model of a resource-based economy. And once again, Peter has appeared on Russia Today, this particular interview titled Breaking the Set. So that's a very, very good interview, well worth checking out and sharing on Facebook and what have you, just to let people know that there are people in the world who see the problems that we see and are willing to give us exposure in order to talk about the potential solutions and a resource-based economy. And actually that higher order level exposure is easily accessible by phoning in to chat shows. And we did have a member in the UK who recently phoned up and had a very good exchange on Radio 5 Live for the BBC, and he eloquated himself very well, a gentleman called Nick Wilcox. And I'm going to play that audio clip for you now, just to give you a taster of what you can do out there with regards to spreading this idea and this message to a much larger audience than you potentially could with just the street activism alone. So here is that excerpt with Nick Wilcox from the Zeitgeist Movement on BBC Radio 5 Live.
Yeah, this sort of notion of technology solving things, there are no solutions, only contingencies. A point comes when it isn't so far so good, you hit the ground. Bang.
And Sonny in Brighton agrees with you. He says, do you think the weather will play a major role, or is climate change, global warming, just a 60-year cycle of weather? Sorry, that's Sean in sunny Brighton. And also Mark in Haslington has got the opposite view, wondering whether you think that the climate change thing is the biggest tax scam ever. Well,
yes, 100%.
Let's stay away from the politics. You want to find out what the future is going to be like? Nick in Morven, in Worcestershire.
Taxes, that's the future.
How are you?
I'm very well, Nick. How are you, sir?
I got to say, that guy just commenting on the technology, technology can actually solve all of the world's problems.
Really?
Without a shadow of a doubt. It can do.
That's Professor Angel laughing at that, and he's the scientist.
He can laugh all he likes, but the reality is, through technology, we can solve hunger, poverty, war, everything.
Although we've got the technology now, and we still have wars, exactly. We still have starvation in the world.
Why do we have those wars?
I don't know.
What are those wars? Those wars are fought over two things: money and resources. Basically, at the root of it, that's what it is. If you introduce something called a resource-based economy, you could eliminate all of that immediately.
But if the technology can solve all those problems, and yet our own human deficiencies create all those problems, where's the give? Which one wins out of...
The human deficiencies that you're speaking of are entirely created through the environment with which we're raised in. You change the environment, you change those conditions.
Greed,
a mass murderer
money.
is not born a mass murderer.
No.
It's created through society. And everything we are indoctrinated in the society we live in to want to buy another microwave every 5 years, or want to buy a new television every 2 months.
Or just have more money than our neighbours, yeah.
Well, the point is that we don't need all this. The reality is the monetary-based economy doesn't work. It doesn't work, does it? We have 1 billion starving people right now. 80% of the population live on less than $10 a day. But these are facts. It might work for you, or it might work for you living in a nice westernized country.
Nick, no, I don't mean... Look, it doesn't work...
Are you denying those statistics, Don?
It doesn't work. It doesn't work whether it's for me or for you, but I'm just saying that a lot of people... look, even people who are on their uppers, if you like, and they think, I want to make as much money as possible. And with that kind of attitude, how can you change that in a world that is full of technology?
You change that through education. The only reason these people want to make money is to accumulate more resource. They want to be able to buy the nicest car. They want to be able to buy the biggest house or fly the nicest airplane. The reality is, if everyone had access to the same sort of technology, the same sort of quality products that never broke down every 2 years or whatever it is, because they're actually built properly, there's no reason for that guy to want more than you, because he has access to all the same information, all the same technology as you. Now, why would you steal from your neighbor if you have that? You wouldn't. Why would you go to war? You wouldn't. You wouldn't need to. It would be completely solved. Money is the problem at the heart of it all.
Ian Pearson, is that a future that you see where we don't argue over money and so on, but we try and solve the world's problem and share the technology out?
Not quite. I've got a lot of sympathy with what he says. I think we are heading towards a world where we can provide everything that everybody needs up to a reasonable, comfortable standard of living. Maybe not everything that everybody wants, but certainly a comfortable standard of living for everybody is entirely achievable. So we can certainly reduce the pressure for wars and so on. But what we can't do, and I think even what we shouldn't do, is to really mess around with the fundamentals of human nature. We're looking at genetic modification and changing just about everything about humans this century. We might be able to change the way the brain works and all of this sort of stuff. So we might even be able to change our basic human nature. We then have to ask really fundamental questions.
What's the basic human nature you're talking of, though? What are you calling basic human nature?
A lot of people don't like each other and they try to kill each other. That's part of human nature. Say that it's just learned, but I don't agree that that's the case.
Through society. The only reason that Jews don't like Muslims and Muslims don't like Jews, sort of historically, is indoctrinated into them. They're not born that way. They're taught that. It's got nothing to do with your genes. Your genes don't make you hate black people or white people or yellow people. It's not that. You're indoctrinated to think that way. And it's education. It's the way we're raised.
Teach you to dislike difference, because that's how a group survives against other groups, because it is dog eats dog. It's
only dog eat dog because we're fighting over resources. We're talking in circles. That's
resources. Why. You see technology as some sort of second coming. No, I
don't. I see it as a possible. Technology has brought us to the point where I can have a conversation with you on a mobile phone.
And Nick,
the reality is technology can solve all of the problems.
Nick, what's the Venus project that you actually wanted to talk about?
Well, the Venus Project is what suggested this concept of a resource-based economy. It's a gentleman named Jacques Fresco in Venus, Florida, who's a social engineer, social designer. He's worked in the military, etc. I could go through a whole bio. But effectively, he's come up with this concept of a resource-based economy and the idea of making the planet through changing it, a social change, a holistic global socio-economic system called the resource-based economy, which can effectively eliminate the need for money, the need for anything, because through technology and applying the scientific method to the way we run society, we can actually solve all the problems. We can feed, clothe, educate, house every single person on this planet right now, and we don't because of money. And until someone wakes up to that reality, the crash is going to happen, and this is going to be what's left.
You live in arguably the most beautiful part of the British Isles, in my view,
Thanks,
Nick.
It's beautiful.
It's
and the
incredible. But when you think ahead 50 years from now, do you think Malvern will be as beautiful as it? Will it be as sparse as it is? Will it be as rural as it is, or will it be a big city?
We'll have wind farms everywhere.
In my concept of a resource-based economy, it will be whatever the people who live here want it to be.
Oh, do you think that they'll have the power then?
He is describing
everyone has the ability to decide where they want to live, how they want to live. They have access to all the same technology, same goods and services.
Nick, appreciate the call. That's all good.
Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Yeah, my pleasure, Nick. Thanks very much. So, Professor, what was it you were saying there?
I said he's envisaging a human termite mound.
And that is in reference to what? Did I miss something along the way?
Human beings as termites.
Right. Okay.
All somehow, this idea.
Not in Malvern, though.
There's no individuality in this equation. It's taking from humans everything that makes them human.
Okay. Yeah, I think a really key point to remember here is you can go on holiday with your very, very best friends. After a couple of weeks, you're starting to have fights with them. You can marry the person you're most in love with ever. After a few weeks of marriage, people start having rows with each other. We never eradicate that conflict just because we haven't fundamentally got anything to argue about. We're built to fight. We're just... we always disagree with each other on something.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. It's this idea that the word education, when in fact they're talking about brainwashing.
Yeah, I mean, I like Ian Angel, but if you locked us in a room together, we'd be fighting within a couple of hours.
So there you go, guys. That was Nick's performance on BBC Radio 5 Live. I thought he did excellently. And I thought I'd leave that little end segment of them talking after Nick because it just goes to show the sorts of prima facie associations that people have to make with any new idea. They have to assimilate it to something, even if it's actually a termite mound. Yes, that's what a resource-based economy will be. You will all live in our termite mound. I mean, I know it gets exasperating listening to this sort of stuff, guys, but ultimately it's just people's self-defense mechanism against a new idea that they can't comprehend, that they won't comprehend, that they don't really wish to, due to the fact that it may threaten some cherished belief system that they currently hold. Any new idea that can't be fit into the current arrangement of associative memory patterns must be something to do with robbing you of your individuality. Yeah, because that's not what the state school education system is like at all. You do not have to report anywhere in uniform at any particular time to then be spoon-fed information by your dictatorial teacher at the front of class, who is, of course, the possessor of all known truth in the universe. You are then to take said known truths and regurgitate them in an exam hall to get enough grades so that you can eventually go out into the job marketplace and get a job that likely completely robs you of your individuality, just so that you can make enough money to survive. There's every concept of individuality in that sort of system, yeah. You being manipulated via marketing and advertising into looking and behaving a certain way, and all of you going out like drones at Christmas in particular to go and buy shit that the people that you're buying it for most likely don't need in some vain attempt for you to remain relevant to the culture in which you exist, is just the maximum expression of individuality. Not to mention the fact that, of course, our system is structurally set up to make sure that if you are poor, it is extremely unlikely that you will be anything otherwise from the day you are born until the day you die. So where's that person's individuality? Apologies for that rather sarcastic and lengthy rant. It does get rather exasperating sometimes listening to this sort of thing. So to answer that point in a slightly more succinct and less emotional manner, how much of you is you? Your views, beliefs, accent, all sorts of different attributes are reinforced by your environment. I think Nick made that point very well, and they did absolutely nothing to really squash any of his points at all, but other than to draw some ridiculously childish notion of how he somehow claimed that we'd all be living in a termite mound. Look, the fact is that you are restricted as to how you live your life on this planet by your purchasing power. So we're talking about a world free of money, debt, barter, servitude, and artificial modes of exchange, whereby we collectively utilise technology to free mankind in order for every human being to be able to reach their fullest potential. That sounds like a society who cherishes the individual to me. It's understandable, you know, people have to use these things. It's like people are always going to have disagreements, that other argument. Well, yes, we're not suggesting a utopia. I don't think Nick said it was going to be a utopia, but considering our language being so drastically out of date, it's not really surprising that it leads to a few misunderstandings now and then. So yes, surely we would want a more collaborative system of communication. That would make quite a bit of sense. But on top of that, who cares if you have a disagreement with someone? Doesn't mean you have to start a war over it now, does it? Or does it? So, moving on. Though I would add, I wouldn't go off on one of those rants on a talk show radio program. I think Nick gave the perfect example of how to eloquate yourself when discussing these topics. So, well done, Nick. And hopefully that should encourage some of you to pick up the phone and ring in when a topic sort of opens itself towards us discussing the areas we talk about. So, in other news, Z-Day 2013 World event is going to be held in Los Angeles. So that should be really good. It's going to have some great speakers there. Jason's from there, Peter, Jen Wilding, and I think they may even have Ben McLeish come along to give a talk as well. So that should be a really excellent event. And it also signifies the need for other chapters around the world to start thinking about their own Z-Day events in 2013 as well. The One Planet project still kicking on out there. I hope that's going well for you guys. It's obviously very good to orientate our street activism around a very easily understood title. So I hope that's going well. Federico Pistono's new book, Robots Will Steal Your Job, but that's okay. How to Survive the Economic Collapse and Be Happy is now out. And it looks like it should be a really great read. I haven't got round to reading it yet, but by all means, go online and you can get yourself a copy. If you just type in Robots Will Steal Your Job, you should be able to find it pretty quickly from there. It was really great to have Jacques and Roxanne on from the Venus Project a few weeks ago on TZM Global Radio, which brings me on to something I would like to relay to members of the Zeitgeist Movement UK, especially around the London area. I have the Venus Project exhibition in my possession, which I would like to see go out an awful lot more than it currently is. An ideal way to set this up would be to find places, preferably free places, that we can set this exhibition up of a day, advertise it, and have people just come in, walk around, maybe ask us some questions, or just be left to read some of the exhibition slides. It is pretty impressive. It's a 25-frame travelling science and technology museum, essentially. And the fact that it spends quite a lot of time sat in storage is a bit of a shame, to say the least. I do take it out to schools and various events that I put on, but it would be great to see it being used a little more often, and perhaps just placed up in a venue for a day, and people can just peruse it in their own time. Basically, that's essentially what an exhibition should be about. It shouldn't be really a presentation and then a Q&A afterwards, because invariably people are distracted away from the exhibition itself to be engaged in the presentation and the Q&A and the discussion, which is obviously great and fine, but essentially the exhibition is there for people to walk around in their own time, to take in both aesthetically as well as take in the vast amount of information that's on display as well. Great venues for this are pubs. If they've got a function room, even better. You can set it up in the function room and advertise it prior, and hopefully the punters that it draws in who may buy pints from the pub will justify being able to have the venue for free. So that's something worth thinking about, basically, guys. So if you're interested in putting on an event of this sort of nature, then get in touch with me via the TZM Education website, which is www.tzmeducation.org. I've also been giving monthly presentations at the Elixir Bar in Camden in London. There is another event coming up on the 13th of November, Tuesday the 13th of November. Kickoff should be around 7, which you can come and look at the exhibition. I'll give a presentation and we'll have a Q&A afterwards. It would be great to see you at that, as essentially these have really become our London Town Hall events. So if you can make it, great. Even better if you can bring along someone who isn't familiar with this or is interested and hasn't really heard about it before, because that is the point of these events, to bring new faces, people who haven't heard of this before. The last one was hugely successful. We had a very, very good turnout and a very passionate Q&A afterwards that went on for the usual legendary times that Zeitgeist Q&As go on for, of course. So that was really, really good. I also went to a school recently and talked to 200 sixth formers, and once again brought another member of the Zeitgeist Movement along with me, and once again they said it was the best Zeitgeist Movement event they'd ever been to, purely because you're talking to people who've never heard about it before, getting a very positive response and being invited back, which has happened at every single school I've been to. I'm only saying this from the perspective of I talk about this stuff all the time, and I suppose I just expected more people to take up this particular angle and really go into schools and talk to kids, because they're just ready to hear it, guys. I don't know how else to put it. We had several different sheets of paper with lots of different questions on them from the various groups that the kids were in at this event. And myself and Christian from the London chapter ended up doing 17 video responses in total to the questions on those sheets of paper, which you can find online, but I know you know the answers to a lot of these questions anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much. But the point was, it was a very good format, actually, to not have a Q&A, but get people to write down their questions. It lets you know where the potential holes were in the presentation, as well as being able to answer in greater detail than usually the allotted time you have given at schools, because obviously they're on a tight schedule. That being said, however, we ended up staying in the common room with a small group of sixth formers who didn't have a lesson to go to, and we had a 2-hour conversation about the material that was presented. 3/4 of the room voted to have the exhibition come back to the school because they wanted to see it and they wanted to find out more information about it. I gave the presentation at a school that I teach the drums at, so I went back to work on Wednesday, and there were sixth formers stopping me saying, "That was a great presentation, you know, we talked about it for the rest of the day." It's a great feeling, guys, but you're the one who has to jump into the fire, so to speak. You're the one who has to jump into the deep end and learn how to swim. I know it's daunting. The first time I did it, it was daunting to me too. My first presentation was in front of 218-year-olds, and some teachers who I was about to tell them largely an awful lot of what they think is relevant isn't. That's quite a daunting prospect. I do understand that, but what else are you going to do, It's a very, very good method. It's a captive audience of people who haven't had their brains raped by this system to the extent that many other people have. They're there anyway, so they're captive, they're going to listen to it, and it's a brand new audience of people who've never heard of it before. It's just, I know I've spoke about this at great length and detail in the past, but just every time I go to one of these events and I bring someone along with me, they just go, why isn't everybody doing this? And I'm like, hello, I know, I'm trying to tell people here. I know that you're all busy out there, guys, and stuff, but I really have only had a handful of people come through on this idea. I've had plenty of people tell me it's a great idea, and I've had some very, very useful contributions to the website. That's very much true. But in terms of people actually going into schools and talking to kids, it's been few and far between. I don't know why that is. If someone can please tell me, why that is, that would be very, very useful. I am doing this website update to make it absolutely ridiculously easy for people to go into schools. And past that, I can't think of any other way I can really convince people that this is a very, very, very good approach for our movement. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that in terms of public speaking events, it's the best thing you can do. That is a bold claim, I know. But if it's not a screening of Zeitgeist Moving Forward or something, which was obviously very, very successful, this is the next best thing. It's better than even having any town hall meeting I've ever put on, or any explicit Zeitgeist meeting event that I've put on. Because as mentioned earlier, you have this captive audience of kids just sitting there waiting to hear it with nice, open, primed minds, ready to hear about new ideas, and with a zest for life and the belief that they can go out and change the world. It just seems like a no-brainer to me. So if you want to help with this, you can get in touch with me through the TZM Education website, and I'll send you a activism pack with all of the information you need to get started. Thanks, guys. The next thing I have in store for you on today's show is the continuation of the book The First Civilisation by Jas Garcher. Jas wanted to update the text for the book, and so I stopped reading on my last radio show, but he has since updated that text, and so I'm going to continue reading from that book in the attempt to sort of build an audio book series for The First Civilisation. So I've already read the prologue and the introduction, which dealt with issues pertaining to human behaviour. The next course of the book is section 1, How to Make a Civilization. It's a rather large section, so I'm going to break it down into the different subheadings. So this section starts with a quote: "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." Albert Einstein. A resource-based economy. The big picture. The concept of a resource-based economy, or RBE for short, was developed over a lifetime by social engineer Jacques Fresco. The basic idea of an RBE is the name. Whereas today's economic systems are based on the management of fancy pieces of paper with dead people's faces on them, also known as money, an RBE is based on the management of the planet's resources, also known as the stuff we need to avoid dying, with as much efficiency as possible. This system also differs from today's economic systems in its overall goal. While the goal of a capitalist system is to continually increase the consumption of resources in order to ensure that the economy grows, despite the fact that this is literally impossible to sustain forever, the goal of an RBE is to provide for the needs of every human. In other words, an individual does not need to earn their right to exist by submitting to the stress-inducing slavery of forced labour. Instead, each person is simply given what they need to survive. In a resource-based economy, there is no need for any form of currency or debt of any kind, which would result in a very powerful shift in priorities. We would no longer be hindered by the profit motive, due to which economics often stands in the way of logic. Currently, we fight the efficiency of automation because humans need jobs to make money. We fight sustainable energy sources that won't pollute for our planet because our economy runs on fossil fuels such as oil. And this, of course, means that despite the fact that we will eventually run out of oil, we must continually accelerate our use of it in order to ensure that our economy keeps growing. With the constraints of the current system, all of this thinking becomes obsolete. We can embrace automation because it frees us from unwanted labour tasks and has the potential to create better products with greater efficiency. We can embrace sustainable energy sources for our physical health and the health of our planet, in addition to the vastly higher potential for energy they give us. This means that we will no longer need to burn through non-renewable sources at mind-boggling rates and can instead attempt to minimise their use and maximise efficiency. Finally, a major difference between an RBE and today's economic systems is the role of governments, laws, and national borders. None of these things would exist in an RBE. In this system, there would be no need to submit to a government or ruling class of any kind. Laws and restrictions on personal freedoms would become largely unnecessary, and the arbitrary borders that isolate us would be done away with, since they provide absolutely nothing but pointless separation. Now, how in the world would that work? Connecting the dots. The easiest way to understand an RBE is to simply dive right in and start explaining every facet from the ground up. By the end of this section, you should have a solid understanding of how this system might work, including the conundrum of how to make society function without laws, governments, or money. I should stress that this outline is in no way official. This is simply my interpretation of the RBE idea, attempting to fill in as many blanks as I can. Most of the general ideas are pulled straight from the mind of Jacques Fresco, but I have combined his overviews with specific ideas of my own in order to create my version of a blueprint for this economic system. By the time this system is actually undergoing any kind of implementation, many, if not all, of the specifics I mention here will likely have been replaced with superior ideas from technical experts in the requisite fields. All I'm trying to do here is give a detailed example of what an RBE model might look like in order to show that this system is technically possible. In other words, consider this model to be a prototype. When the real thing is implemented, it will likely be a far superior system to what I have outlined here. Energy. No matter how well designed a society is, it is not very likely to function without some method of generating energy. Currently, our primary method of energy generation is to dig decomposed plants and animals out of the ground and then burn them. Although this method is fairly primitive, it nonetheless generates a surprisingly high amount of energy, along with a high amount of environmental destruction and personal health deterioration. Despite these drawbacks, our global economic system relies so heavily on the use of fossil fuels that we must consistently throw sustainable alternatives to the side in order to maintain employment levels and economic growth. Since there is no reason to worry about employment or economic growth in an RBE, there is no reason to cling to these unsustainable and biologically harmful energy sources. Instead, we can turn to the myriad of incredibly powerful sustainable energy sources that cause little or no environmental destruction. There is a huge number of such energy sources that could potentially be used, and I'll highlight a few of them here. Advancing technologies are continually making both wind power and solar power more efficient, with one study proposing that wind power is quickly becoming competitive with fossil fuels, even in the monetary economic system. Logically speaking, I think it makes sense that if one were to live on a planet that is circulating a gigantic ball of nuclear reactions which is constantly firing free energy in all directions, one might want to take advantage of this source. Fortunately for us, We happen to live on such a planet, where we can harness the power of our sun directly using solar panels or indirectly using wind, which is driven by the sun's heat. Despite these convenient sources, wouldn't it be even better if there was a substantial source of heat energy right under our feet? As it turns out, there is. Geothermal energy taps directly into the extreme heat that permeates most of the interior of our planet, providing a practically unlimited source of energy. While geothermal energy does create a small amount of pollution, advanced geothermal systems will be able to reduce this amount while simultaneously increasing efficiency and locking excess CO2 in the ground, rather than pumping it into the air. Each of these sources is being used to some extent today, but there is another source of energy that is largely untapped, despite being extremely abundant and completely clean. I'm speaking of the power of our oceans, specifically wave and tidal power. Wave power involves harnessing the energy of ocean surface waves and converting their kinetic energy into electrical energy, a process which could have up to an astonishing 99% efficiency. Since surface waves are driven by the wind, this would also be an indirect method of harnessing the power of the sun. Another energy source abundant in the ocean is tidal power, wherein we harness the kinetic energy of changing ocean tides in order to generate electricity. Since tides are created by the gravitational force of the moon, we would actually be harnessing the moon's gravitational energy. You can't find a much cleaner source of energy than gravity. Furthermore, in order to ensure a constant supply of energy from some of these sources, it would be necessary to make use of energy storage systems, including supercapacitors. A supercapacitor is a device that stores a large amount of electrical charge, sort of like a giant battery. Energy storage systems would be used to ensure that sources with variable energy output would always be able to provide stable amounts of electricity. For example, on a very windy day, a wind turbine might generate more energy than is needed at that time. Rather than allow this energy to go to waste, it would be stored and then harnessed for days when the wind is low and less energy is being generated. This same logic would apply to solar panels, which generate variable energy depending on how sunny the day is. The strategic use of supercapacitors and other storage devices would ensure that power outage and rolling blackouts become a thing of the past. As we can see, there is a huge variety of sustainable, environmentally friendly energy sources which could provide all of the power that is necessary to run society. In fact, solar energy on its own could theoretically provide 20,000 times as much energy as the Earth uses right now. The point is, there is absolutely no reason we could not power our entire global society using clean, sustainable energy sources other than the fact that this is currently not as profitable as using fossil fuels. Use and management of resources. It's all well and good to pump out a lot of energy, but it doesn't actually benefit us unless we are able to provide for the needs of our species. All this starts with the planet's resources. As it says in the name, a resource-based economy is all about managing the planet's resources in the most efficient and responsible way possible. This is to ensure that there will always be enough resources for every human to not only survive but thrive. So, not only do we have to be responsible with our resource use, but we should also make sure that the entire process is as automated as possible. We'll start by talking about what are perhaps the most important resources of all: food and water. As of today, the primary method of generating food is to plant things in the ground and pray to the gods that they grow. Despite engaging in agriculture for about 12,000 years, we have yet to make any major advances in the way we grow food. Rather than relying on traditional methods such as irrigation and hoping for droughts to end, wouldn't it make much more sense for us to make use of advanced agricultural technologies? This is where the concept of vertical farms comes in. A vertical farm is a building that uses hydroponics and aeroponics to grow food on an industrial scale in the middle of a controlled environment. Since all of the food is grown indoors, we would no longer need to rely on finding the right kind of dirt to grow food. Instead, we could grow it anywhere that a tower could be built at any time of the year in any sort of weather. Furthermore, growing the food in a controlled environment means that we would no longer need to use poisonous pesticides, instead growing purely organic produce. Couple this with the fact that hydroponics and aeroponics require about 5 to 10% of the water and nutrients that are spent on traditional farming, and suddenly we have the ability to vastly increase our food production and have that food available basically anywhere. Apartment buildings could have a few floors devoted to farming, thus providing the building with fresh, local organic produce. The same logic could also be used for schools and hospitals. And of course, since the food is grown in a building rather than on a farm, there would be no need to burn copious amounts of energy on transporting the food hundreds of miles into the city. All of the food would be grown right around the corner, if not a few floors above your bed. Best of all, waste and water could continually be recycled in this system, thus vastly reducing the amount of resources needed in order to keep a vertical farm running and preventing the building from producing large amounts of pollution. Ultimately, this single technology could allow us to produce enough food to feed the entire human population. The list of benefits goes on and on. Of course, relying purely on vertical farms makes the assumption that the world is vegetarian. Fear not, my good omnivores, for research in the field of artificial meat production is accelerating as we speak. By growing muscle tissue in a controlled artificial medium, it would be possible to produce meat products, along with animal skins and furs for use in clothing, without ever having to kill another animal. In addition, the controlled environment greatly reduces the risk of animal-borne diseases reaching your mouth, produces none of the pollution associated with traditional meat production, and eliminates the need for clear-cutting forests to create grazing land for livestock animals. The major drawback is that the artificial meat production is still in its infancy. Further research will be required before artificial meat can be produced on an industrial scale, particularly within a monetary system. Nonetheless, the prospect of being able to produce meat without worrying about disease, pollution, or animal suffering makes this field extremely likely to see some serious attention in the near future. That covers the production of food, but what about water? Even though most of our planet is covered by it, the majority of water in the world is not drinkable by humans. So how will we solve the problem of giving every human access to clean water? After all, it's not like we can just create water out of thin air, right? Actually, we totally can. Atmospheric water generators have the ability to create pure water from the moisture that is locked in the air. Keep in mind that when water evaporates from our salty oceans, the salt doesn't go with it. The moisture that is present in our atmosphere is actually able to provide us with a universal source of clean water. It is literally floating around in front of our faces. So, we now have the potential to eradicate hunger and ensure that no human will ever need to drink contaminated water again. Not a bad start. However, there are resources other than food that we need to consider, most of which require extraction directly from the environment. Before we can begin extracting resources, we must first have a system in place to keep track of how much of each resource we have, where they are located, and their rates of change. The initial surveys would likely need to be done by humans, just as they are now. However, once the first set of data is in, the rest of the process could be automated. For example, let's say we want to keep track of the number of trees in a forest. First, we would send a survey team into the area to make an estimate of the number of trees in the forest by having the team count the number of trees in a known area and multiply that by the total area of the forest, a process called sampling. This number would then be recorded into a resource management database. Rather than having all of the data locked up in one computer, it would be distributed amongst a worldwide network, much like the internet, in order to ensure that one computer's failure would not bring the whole system down. Once the initial surveys are complete, we would set up a system of cameras or automatic sensors that would be able to count the number of trees currently present in the sampled area. and constantly compare the number to the one initially logged into the system. This would allow us not only to keep track of how many trees are present, but also their rates of use and renewal over long periods of time. This same logic would need to be applied to major resource deposits of all kind around the world. It is critical that we keep track of things like fresh water supplies, animal populations, and rare metal deposits. By having all of the information integrated into a worldwide internet-like database, the information would always be available to anyone around the world. Although this tracking method is less than perfect, advancing technology could make the entire process more accurate and automated over time. Okay, now we know how much we have of all the major resources and where they are located. Next, we would need to be able to extract and refine those resources so that we can actually use them. Fortunately for us, autonomous resource extraction systems are already in existence. Take, for example, the process of mining. Surface radar systems are able to automatically map an underground area and provide real-time data to an operator. In an RBE, the operator would simply be a computer that receives input data from the Resource Management Database and the Global Demand Database. More on that soon. Once the area is mapped, autonomous excavating systems are able to navigate the rock faces and determine precisely how to extract the desired mineral. The movement of minerals across the site could be accomplished by using automated hauling trucks. Once the minerals are extracted and transported, they must be refined into a usable form. Once again, fortune smiles upon us as automating the mineral refining process is completely feasible today. Once the refining process is complete, we would be ready to move into manufacturing and distribution. And I'm going to stop reading there. The next subtitle I'm going to come on to is that of manufacturing of goods. Obviously, there's a lot of good information in there. It's really only a microcosm view of some of the technologies that we have available to us and how they could be applied in a more comprehensive, strategic, efficient and sensible way to planetary and human concern. But nonetheless, I think it's a rather good showcase, and it has a few humorous moments in there as well. So I look forward to reading more from the First Civilization in my next radio show. Okay, well, I think that's just about it for today's show. Just to reiterate that the whole principle of this show really was for the launch of the First Christmas project. So once again, I'd encourage you to go and check that out by just typing in the First Christmas into Facebook and popping the Twibbon badge, as it's known, onto your Facebook profile picture so that you can show your family and friends that you actually got the message about what Christmas should be about. I'd like to close today's show with a very funny song close to my heart in terms of my sense of humour, at least, from Monty Python member Eric Idle. If you have any children around you now and you don't particularly want too many profanities entering their little innocent ears, I would suggest you turn off the show now, because this next song is called Fuck Christmas. Thanks very much, guys. All the best. Bye.
Fuck Christmas. It's a waste of fucking time. Fuck Santa. He's just out to get your dime. Fuck holly and fuck ivy and fuck all that mistletoe. White-bearded big fat bastards ringing bells where'er you go. And bloated men in shopping malls all going ho, ho, ho. It's fucking Christmas time again. Fuck Christmas. It's a fucking Disney show. Fuck reindeer and all that fucking snow. Fuck carols and fuck Rudolph and his stupid fucking nose. Fucking sleigh bells tinkling everywhere you fucking goes. Fuck stockings and fuck shopping, it just drives us all insane. Go tell the elves to fuck themselves. It's Christmas time.